Here are the main advantages and disadvantages when it comes to emigrating to Cuba. Advantages. Low cost of living. Compared to many Western countries, the cost of living in Cuba is significantly lower. Food, rent and services are more affordable. Pleasant climate. Cuba has a tropical climate with warm temperatures all year round, which is ideal for people who don't like the cold weather. Rich culture and history. Cuba is known for its rich culture, music, such as salsa and son, dance and its unique history, especially in the context of the revolution. Natural beauties. The country offers beautiful beaches, mountains and historic cities such as Havana and Trinidad. The Caribbean coast offers many opportunities for outdoor recreational activities. Friendly locals. Cubans are generally very hospitable and open towards foreigners. Many people find Cuban society to be warm and welcoming. Low crime rate. The crime rate in Cuba is relatively low compared to many other Latin American countries, making the country a safe place for expats. Disadvantages. Difficult economic situation. Cuba's economy suffers from a weak domestic market, and there are often shortages of essential products such as food and consumer goods. Access to many goods may be restricted. Limited labor market. Finding legal work in Cuba can be difficult, especially for foreigners. Many sectors of the economy are state-controlled, and private companies often have difficulty establishing themselves. Political and social restrictions. Cuba has a highly centralized political system with limited freedom of expression and freedom of the press. This can be challenging for people accustomed to a liberal democracy. Limited access to technology. Access to modern technology and fast internet remains limited in Cuba. This can be a problem especially for people who work in the digital field. Health system. While Cuba has a well-developed public health system, there is often a shortage of medical supplies and modern treatments. Expatriates often prefer private medical facilities, but these are limited. Bureaucracy and slow processes. Administrative procedures and other administrative processes in Cuba are often bureaucratic and can take a lot of time. This can be frustrating, especially for newcomers. Restricted freedom of expression. Political expressions of opinion that are directed against the system will not be tolerated and may lead to consequences. Freedom of expression in Cuba is severely restricted because the political system has been dominated by the Cuban Communist Party since the Cuban Revolution in 1959. Cuba is a one-party state in which the regime exercises strict control over the media, public opinion and the political opposition. Here are some important aspects of the situation of freedom of expression in Cuba. Control of the media. All mass media in Cuba, including newspapers, radio and television, are state-controlled. Private media are banned and access to independent or foreign news sources is severely restricted. Journalists must adhere to official government guidelines, and there is very little space for critical or alternative reporting. Censorship of the Internet. Internet access in Cuba is heavily regulated and monitored. The dissemination of independent information or content critical of the government can be prosecuted and punished. Although Cuba has expanded access to the Internet in recent years, the government blocks many opposition websites and social media. In addition, Internet access remains expensive and slow for many citizens. Political dissidents and human rights activists who publicly criticize the government are often monitored, intimidated or arrested. There are repeated reports of repression against people who openly express their opinions. Protests against the regime are rare and are often quickly and rigorously suppressed. Security forces often resort to intimidation, arrests and long prison sentences to silence criticism. A party system and political control. Since Cuba is a one-party state, there are no independent political parties. Political discussions or movements that are not in line with the ideology of the Communist Party are seen as a threat. Elections do take place, but they are heavily regulated and do not offer any opportunity to choose a political alternative to the Communist Party. Surveillance and repression. Cuban authorities carefully monitor both citizens and foreigners. People suspected of holding opposition views or of interacting with foreign groups critical of the government may be monitored and persecuted by state security. Repression can range from professional bans and travel restrictions to long prison sentences. Role of artists and intellectuals. Artists, writers and intellectuals who express criticism of the government may be censored or persecuted. Although Cuba has a rich cultural scene, many artists must be careful not to come into conflict with the government. However, there is also a growing movement of artists and intellectuals who are trying to point out grievances through subtle forms of protest. International reactions. Human rights organizations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have repeatedly criticized Cuba for violating freedom of expression. The Cuban government often denies these allegations, arguing that such measures are necessary to protect the revolutionary system. Cuba offers an exotic, culturally rich environment with a relatively low cost of living and a safe everyday life. However, economic, political and technological constraints can pose a challenge for many expats. Those who are comfortable with the Cuban system and are willing to live in a less developed environment can benefit from Cuba's advantages. Don't forget to write in the comments what country you want to see next. Subscribe and like the video. Thank you.